Well, I want to welcome you all to this lecture. In this lecture, we're going to delve a little further into the concept of awareness and presence. And it's going to deal with largely the interaction between predator and prey, and have in some ways a hunter perspective, but I don't want somebody who's against hunting or doesn't like the idea of it to feel that they aren't welcome. I think they'll find a rich vein of knowledge in this lecture that they'll be able to use and appreciate the natural worlds, the world that they walk in, and still see the predator-prey relationship and experience it at a deeper level. And so with that, let us start. The first thing we want to talk about is kind of the structure of the animal, because that's kind of where our starting point is with this lecture. If we look at the desert bighorn sheep or deer, as they would be out in the desert, and you could list cottontail rabbit, just antelope, chipmunks, bobcat to an extent, and even the zebra-tailed sand lizard, all have one attribute in common, and that is that they have a very bright and white rear end. And that attribute of theirs is often one, if you just look at it, is kind of curious in so much that you would think that it would be counterproductive, especially for a sheep or a deer, to have this bright white rear end advertising their presence. And so one has to think about this. Why do so many animals use this strategy? And obviously they must use it effectively for so many animals to have this attribute. And so we're going to talk about how that happens and what it can be used for. And it ends up being really part of their strategy for living. And we're going to more or less center on the desert bighorn sheep and how it uses this particular attribute that's part of its very, biology, part of its body's makeup. And so we'll start with, of course, it's obvious that you can see a sheep easier when it's turned around. And I've done this many times in the field where a whole group of sheep are on the side of a hill and one of them turn around and that white rear end is facing you suddenly, and you see him and then you see the other sheep, because he's there. There's probably others. You look harder. In a sense, you're focusing your vision now in that area and your awareness, and you start picking up other animals. So, of course, if we do this, certainly the bobcat or the mountain lion is also going to pick up on this. Well, one of the interesting things about the color white in a small patch of it is that, in fact, in the desert, there's a lot of small white patches. And you can see a hillside, oftentimes it'll be speckled with these little white patches. So on one end of the whole awareness and presence spectrum, they actually blend in. There's actually enough white spots out in the desert that will catch your eye off and say, what's that? And you look and it's just maybe some bird droppings on the side of a rock, or even a rock that's fairly dark in color might be just angled such that it's got just enough glare that at that angle it actually looks like a white spot. And so these white spots can be confusing if you're looking. Now, oftentimes though, the animal itself, let's say our bighorn sheep, they might be like on a hillside here, and let's say it's the big hill, and they might start out as a group here, and through the course of the day, let's say there's 10 of them, and 5 go off this way, and they end up over here, and another 5 just kind of drift off this direction, and so they're off over here. Now, and we're looking sideways on this hill, they've been separated, let's say for 5-6 hours, it's starting to get evening, and that herd mentality starts to take over, and they want to herd up because 1 sheep is in danger, 2 is in less, and 5 sheep have a certain amount of danger, and 10 even less, because they have eyes and ears pointing in every direction all the time. So this group, we'll say maybe is the junior group, and they look over here and they see white butts. And that means maybe these guys are going to go around the mountain. Well, that doesn't make them feel too comfortable, but they're just slowly going. They're not running or nothing. So they've looked over here and they see these white butts over here, and they can ascertain that things are pretty calm, but they're leaving. So these guys want to come back. They decide to go back toward the herd. Now, if you look again at a sheep, and again an antelope, a deer, cottontail rabbit, etc., as he's walking into something, that something looking back is actually seeing a very well camouflaged individual. So these sheep walking this way, if there's a mountain lion right here, they're camouflaged. And of course this mountain lion would then be seeing these guys. He's seeing their little white rear ends, and they're leaving. So he's probably starting to slink this direction. Now it could be a human hunter. This could be a bobcat. Maybe it's a couple of coyotes and they see some white rear ends and they think, well, they can tag team a ewe and get a lamb out of this situation. So they're slinking along this way. Now, these guys are camouflaged moving in this direction. And so you got the whole group going this way. Well, if they come up either by wind or sound or whatever, they become aware. Let's say by this time they're right on top of him, basically. And they become aware of that mountain lion. We'll just make it a mountain lion for this particular example. Well, what they're going to do is they're going to panic. And they're going to take off like so. They're going to leave the country. Well, if you remember, our 4 or 5 guys over here, they're walking this way, but they're milling. They're just kind of looking it over, eating this, eating that, but they're heading that direction. Every now and then one of them's looking back, and they see white butts here splitting. Well, they've just been notified. They've just been notified that there's a problem, and it's probably heading their way. And of course, they're going to make evasive action. They're going to bunch up on a hill, which would be one of the things that they'd most likely do if they saw that, is the first thing they're going to do is bunch up, and then all of them focus their attention back this way. That would be probably the most common response. And of course, if just one of them sees the predator and IDs him, he's out of there, and the rest will follow. So we can see in this that the white rear end is not necessarily a detriment to the survival of the animal. It's not something like the peacock's tail where he's trying to use it to attract a mate, even though it's dangerous and expensive for him to have and maintain. The white rear end is really something quite different. And we can show another possible scenario in which a similar thing will happen, and having been busted by this a few times myself, found out the hard way, I can tell you it actually works. It happens. Let's say we have a little water hole here, and we have a hill. We've got to have a proper hill here. And make our water, and it comes along here, and then we got another hill over here. Now, again, we're talking sheep. Although other animals, your deer, and again, if you use like ground squirrels or something, that scales down. But we're using the sheep to give our example today. Now, a group of sheep will come over, let's say over this, and they're coming down, they're coming to water. Now, they'll come over the top, they'll get where they're camouflaged, and they'll sit there and look at this water for a while and scope the area out. But if there's something down here, they're looking at something camouflaged. May not pick it up. But let's say for just our scenario, we have a mountain lion and we have a human hunter. And our human hunter can be an ancient hunter-gatherer with a spear, or we can pull them up further in time with a bow and arrow, or even a rifle. But he's a human hunter, and this is our, we'll say, our mountain lion. Now, the sheep come down. Now, it might be that their camouflage gets them in without being detected, but in our scenario, it really doesn't matter. We're going to say they come in and they get a drink, owing to the fact that the mountain lion and the human hunter can't reach them due to an open space. So they're not willing to cut across that and try to get them because it's too open. So then our sheep take off and go back up. Of course, white rear end in. So if these guys haven't picked it up, they're going to pick it up now. But if they've already picked it up, they're going to have a very precise place that when they sheep go over the hill and down this way, our two predators are going to know exactly on that hill they went over, because they're going to see the little white rear ends go right over the top. And let's start with our first scenario on this. Now that this has happened and our sheep have come across, let's start with our first hunter or predator. He's going to go slinking across the ground as fast as he can go. But he's probably going to slink along like a cat does and try to mimic as many natural movements and places and do as much cover as he can. But because he's moving, of course, his awareness has been lost somewhat, it's shrunk. And of course, his presence is much bigger. The sheep may have never seen him. They may have never seen him, but they're still going to do what sheep do. And as he's moving across this flats out here, let's say we got our 4 or 5 little sheep over here, one of them, at least one, maybe two, is going to come back over and look. And generally speaking, but not always, he's just going to peek his head over the top. I've seen it many times. And he's going to peek over and he's going to look back down that valley. So he's not going to give himself a full body view to the valley. He's going to give as minimal a view as he can where he can still see. Now if he has to get up higher, he'll do that to see. But when he looks down the valley, he's got a huge advantage. One, of course, the predator is moving, and so he's easier to pick out. but also he knows what route he's made. He knows where he's shown his little rear end, and that those predators are going to be focused in on that. So he doesn't have to look over the entire valley. He knows where they're going to come up. And if this guy cuts, especially our mountain lion predator, when he gets up into here and gets onto that scent trail, he's going to be almost like on a railroad track. He's going to be absolutely focused where he's going. He's had a visual clue as to where they're going, or actually sign, and now he's following scent. He's going to go right on up there, just beeline it. Now, of course, because this guy's camouflaged and he is projecting and looking down this way and knows where to look, and this guy is in motion. This guy's probably up here standing still. Much easier to see our mountain lion. And of course, what he's going to do is he's going to take off running. And when he takes off running, every one of these other guys is going to know that something dangerous is following them. They're just going to know it. They're not going to have any kind of complex language. Body language alone is going to tell them that, hey, you know, our rear guard saw something dangerous and it's time to run. And so they're going to do that. Now, our next scenario was our hunter. And the first part of it is going to be pretty much the same. This part here is going to be the same. And if our hunter, our human hunter, takes off as soon as they go over, he's going to be busted, and he's going to go home to his wife, his kids, and say, you go hungry today. His parents, if they still living in the tribe, are going to be ashamed of him. It's going to be bad news. He's under a lot of pressure to deliver. And this is something we modern humans sometimes don't appreciate, the pressure that some of these ancient hunter-gatherers were really under. But he's been in the field before. He knows the gig. And so he's waiting for this guy to come on over the top. He's not broke cover. He's waited. Now, after this guy's come up the top, has been satisfied that there's nothing following him, he's going to want to get back to the herd. He's going to want to get back to them. So he's going to turn around fast enough to catch up with the herd, but not at a panic rate. And they'll be able to pick up the body language that he's just catching up, and there's nothing really to worry about. But there is, of course, in this case. We have a human hunter. Now, not only was he able to wait, sometimes the cat might have been able to wait. That's about as far as he's going to take it. But our human hunter knows that if he comes around this way, there's going to be possibly a wind situation that these animals will pick up. And if he comes around the other way, he might know the terrain enough to know that maybe there's a cliff that's blocking his route along that way, so that he has to actually come up, over, and around if he's going to try to catch and get a bighorn sheep to take to camp that night. And that is the difference between these two. Between these two, that's the difference. This guy is thinking, and he has a lot more of a past to draw on, and so he's far more able to look at a more complex future and many possible futures, and that's how he's hunting. He is hunting with his mind, as opposed to the speed and the stealth that this guy's using, and just the raw muscle that a big cat can often have. And so we can see that the desert bighorn, his mind, his body, is integral. It's meshed in not only into the the lay of the land, the actual geology, where the white butt reflects like some of the parts and particles of a mountain of fresh broken rock, is often lighter colored. His body is shaped to that. His mind is shaped to the body to keep him alive in strategy, and that these hunters are also working that same mind, body, land integrated system. And once you start to understand that, you're able to take that knowledge and start placing it or using it in different directions. Whether you're trying to find a sheep, whether you're trying to find a coyote, a place where they might bed, whatever your goal is, if you start understanding that their bodies, their minds are integrated to the land and integrated to the experience that you are, then you begin to know the way of things and begin to see and appreciate the beauty that's out there in the desert that isn't always picturesque, meaning that it's just a visual view, a landscape, but the beauty of the action, reaction, predator-prey, and so on. And with that, I thank you, and I hope you've enjoyed this video.